Hey everyone, welcome back to Make It Happen Mondays, where we talk about sales, business, entrepreneurship, personal growth, mental health, and everything in between with guests who I truly respect and I think make a positive impact on the world around us. Now, today's guest is Nate Andres, and talk about making a positive impact. His mission is to make the world a better place, one human at a time, by building authenticity and resilience in others. And that's what caught my attention about Nate when we connected, is he talks about authentic resilience. And we dove into that. Now, he's got 25 years experience in HR. He's been all over the world, Japan, Singapore, lived in all sorts of different countries, experienced all sorts of adversity as well that has built this resilience in him. I mean, he's been through earthquakes, tsunamis, 9/11, discrimination, and everything else. We talked through all that and what it takes to be resilient and what the definition of it really is, and also what the definition of authentic resilience is. You all know me, I think authenticity is a superpower, and it's not enough out there. There's not enough people really truly being their authentic selves. So we dove into that. And we talked about core values. We talked about the definition again of resilience and what it is and what it isn't. And his REAL model, REAL, there's a very specific acronym that walks you through how to become authentically resilient, which, like I said, I think is more important now than ever, because look, things aren't getting any easier out there. So I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. I really, really think more people need to hear this message. So let's make it happen. Nathan Andres, welcome to the Make It Happen Monday podcast, my friend. How you doing?
I'm good, John. How's it going for you?
It's going well. It's been an interesting year and a half, if nothing else. So I'm really interested in this conversation we're going to have about authentic resilience, because I've had to be quite resilient over the past few years with all the chaos that's happening right now. And authenticity, I always talk about as a superpower. So I'm excited for this conversation and to dive into it. But before we do, you have a rather unique background, my friend. I looked in the show notes and I looked through some of your stuff, and you have, talk about resilience, 9/11, earthquakes, tsunamis, discrimination, like you name it, you've been through it. So could you back us up? I want to talk about those things, those impact and how they impacted your life. But I also would love to understand your true origin story, like growing up. You know what I mean? Because I always am curious about where people get their DNA to do what they're doing right now, and from their parents, from their environment, whatever it is. So if you could kind of start us like as a kid growing up, I'd love to just learn a little bit more of that. And then we can dive into authentic resilience, because I think this topic is more important than ever right now.
Love it. Well, thanks for that huge, wide wingspan of a question to open up like a long, long time ago. Actually, I'm actually back in my home state here in Ohio, where I was born and raised. I'm actually just sitting at my brother's house and doing real normal things like house sitting, dog sitting. And
nice.
I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, and lived here until I was in high school. And then my family moved to Chicagoland. We moved, grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, and then I went onward to Wisconsin to Marquette University. So I'm kind of a Great Lakes state guy. I've lived in a variety of the kind of upper Great Lakes states. But, I think I had this interesting background with my grandparents. My dad's side lived in Japan back in the 70s. He was affiliated with the U.S. Marine Corps, and he was a double doctor. I was a veterinarian, and he was a PhD. And so he was helping the Japanese government in the 70s do large farm animal health, and things that we know now as Wagyu beef and Kobe beef and things like this were part of this kind of way to create a Japanese brand of cattle that could be for the Japanese eating public, but also became kind of world renowned. But ultimately, when they came back from Japan, I had this kind of inkling that maybe there's some interesting things over there. And when it was time to go to Marquette, I ended up studying Japanese. I was in the first class of Japanese at Marquette that was offered. And funny enough, people always ask me, well, how did you choose that? I grew up speaking a couple other languages, and Romance languages are kind of boring for me. And I thought, Japan, maybe there's something with my grandparents. I got to explore that. When I looked at the Guild catalog, it was, to be honest with you, I was not a morning person after all those years of high school. It was Chinese Mandarin at 8 a.m. or Japanese at 10. And I was like, I'll take Japanese at 10.
Japanese.
Yeah. Long story short, I ultimately went to Japan after I graduated from Marquette with a degree in political science. I thought I was going to go save the world as a diplomat. And it didn't really happen that way. Although I would tell you that in many ways, I kind of became a diplomat in my international business career. I kind of became an accidental business person, definitely an accidental HR person. But after 5 years working in Japan, moved back to the United States. I worked in fashion, which was really great. It was before there was an apprentice or Project Runway. That was my job. I was sending runway models down, at New York Fashion Week. The first week I was, started, but doing Japan-related business to expand the brand. And that kind of fell flat after 9/11, which I'll tell you later, disaster and I are kind of friends. We're friendly.
But I mean, again, 9/11 earthquakes and tsunamis, those sound like three pretty big disaster scenarios that I have not partaked in. I mean, obviously 9/11, but I wasn't there. I experienced, but earthquakes and tsunamis, I've thankfully avoided.
Blackouts, hurricanes, typhoons. I've kind of had them all in my repertoire. Wow. But fast forward to being an HR leader and a business person. I got involved. I worked in Major League Baseball for 6 years.
Oh, cool.
And then ultimately joined and did HR and practiced HR for luxury retail. And that's what took me back to Asia. I kind of also became an Asia Pacific business person. And living through, the great earthquake of 3/11, after 9/11 and the blackouts, and then certainly the tsunami, nuclear disasters, a couple of typhoons. I moved to Hong Kong, lived there for 8 years, and ultimately lived in Singapore for the last 4 years, where I've just come back to the United States not long ago. So I've kind of been an international Asia Pac HR business person by accident. But, when I look at my original dream to be that diplomat, I thought, yep, I kind of was able to be a diplomat just in a really different way. And often that was about helping people be amazing at their jobs, and also, helping businesses expand and drive top line growth and really create momentum for big brands and big businesses.
Love it. Let me ask, we're going to get into that, but let me ask about the culture, because I've been to Japan, and I found Japan. My uncle lived there for years, and he also lived in Singapore, and I visited Singapore quite a bit as well. What's your favorite part of the Japanese culture? Because I was only exposed to a bit of it, but I was fascinated with it when I was there I was only there for a couple of weeks. But I guess what if you were to say like your favorite part about that culture compared to other cultures that you've been around, would you be able to pinpoint there something specific about them that you really stands out for you?
Yeah, that's a great question, John. I mean, awesome. There's a lot about Japanese culture that's really special, and many people who live in the region, Asia Pacific, say that Japan's culture is kind of culture on steroids compared to the rest, and that's true. I would tell you the thing that sticks out for me is this spirit of what they call gambare. Gambare is this: do your best, give it your all, put more gas in there. Even if you can't, get through everything, you kind of have this gambare spirit. And there's a gambate kudasai, these language words that kind of rally cry for give it your all, do your best, keep going, don't give up. And, this is part and parcel, I think, why resilience also lives in my blood, because it was kind of part and parcel of the living experience there. When you live in a country and you're the only Caucasian person for miles around, geez, I got a lot of stories about that. You kind of learn to be scrutinized and looked at in all the ways, and kind of keeping that gambare spirit of keep going and don't give up and take that control back to do your best is something that's quite unique. There's no other word in English that translates back to that gambare or gambate kudasai. Yeah, it's a very unique flavor of Japanese culture. And if you live in Japan, and anyone who has lived in Japan will tell you that you hear gambare, you hear gambate. It always means good luck. It means do your best, try hard, fight. It means a lot of things, but it really is a special part of why Japanese culture is as resilient as it is, because it's collective and it's bringing people together and it's communal, and those really help drive, I think, what makes Japan really unique.
Yeah, I love that, because for me it was, I only experienced it a little bit, right? 2 weeks, but it was almost like organized chaos. Like everything, I couldn't believe like how many people and how many things were happening, but that it all just worked. And I don't know how to explain it otherwise. It's like when you're crossing the street, it seemed, that ridiculous where like the 5 streets come together and then whatever that place.
Yeah.
That, like, my uncle's like, okay, are you ready? And I'm like, for what? He's like, when that light turns, like, just walk straight. And I'm like, well, of course. He's like, no, just follow me. I'm like, all right. And then it went, and I was like, oh my God. And I thought everybody was going to smash into each other and everything else. And just happened that everybody just went in the exact spots they weren't supposed to go to. I'm like, that was fascinating.
Japanese
like
precision.
People would have gotten, there would have been people who gotten killed in America if that happened. Like people would just be in the middle, just fighting with each other. So I'm excited to get back. My cousin, my nephew, he's a sophomore at San Jose State, and he got the same bug. I don't know why, because our uncle is not living there anymore. But he's going to Japan for a semester abroad next year, which I'm really excited. He's learning Japanese, so.
It's a great experience. And if you want to have them connect with me afterwards, I'm happy to, give the tips, because it's a great place to kind of find yourself. That old phrase that we used to hear growing up, you got to go far away to find yourself. I think that living in Japan is probably about as far as you can go from Columbus, Ohio. And,
yeah, probably.
and certainly I found a lot of myself while I was there.
Love it. Awesome. Well, let's talk about that resilience, because I think this topic is more important than it ever has been in a lot of ways, because a lot has happened obviously in the past 2 to 3 years here. As far as, and it doesn't seem to be getting any easier, if you know what I mean. I mean, things just keep getting more and more complex. People are especially in my industry, sales and tech sales specifically has been beat the crap out of for the past 2 years. And, there's a lot of reps, quite frankly. Something that drove, an interesting thing for me to think about, and I'd love to unpack here with you, is I've been in sales for 28 years, right? And I've seen the ups and downs and whatever. And for whatever reason, for me, for some reason, I like the chaos. You know what I mean? And I've never tried to be somebody else. If somebody were to ask you what my superpower is, it is authenticity, because I just think that lying is too hard, and I'm not that creative. But I've had reps come up to me after being in the industry for like 2-3 years or whatever, and being like, dude, like, I am burnt out right now. Like, I am straight up burnt out. How have you stayed in this field, in this industry for 28 years? And I get, and I talk about my why and my values, but I can't really put a finger on why, like, I enjoy the chaos. I've been doing this for so long, and I'm like, yeah, bring it on. Like, my whole company fell apart last year and I'm rebuilding it again. And it sucks, but fuck it, let's go. But so many people, and I want to talk generationally too, of what you're seeing out there. But could you, first of all, let's define what you mean by authentic resilience. Let's start with that.
I think it's great. And thanks for sharing part of your story there, John. That's incredible. 28 years, 29 years in sales, because that is resilience if I ever heard it. And sales is hard. I love salespeople. I respect them so much because they're getting beat down. And I often have said, and recently kind of started to phrase it this way, is, rejection is redirection. And I think that, when you learn how to drive in that way, it's pretty amazing. But authentic resilience is a superpower. And I think the first part of that, authenticity, is really about understanding who you are. It is your core values. It is your core strengths. It is all of the things that you believe about yourself, and then the things that you limit yourself in believing about yourself. And often that's where we get trapped up. But I think if we spend time to really get to know ourselves, and then release all the crap that isn't serving ourselves, and really understand who we are from the inside out, when we go out in the world, the environment helps, bring the things outside in. So it's an outside in, inside out understanding of self. And when we know who we are, exactly who we are, and what we bring to the table, that is how I look at what authenticity is knowing yourself. And people say, well, that's so, isn't that being selfish? And I say, absolutely not, because selfish is very different than being self-ish.
Really?
It's a spelling issue. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But, if you look at the word selfish, like brownish or greenish, selfish is understanding, and being knowledgeable about self. Who else better than you knows that? Right?
And I think, I remember hearing this early as a child and thinking that, oh my God, how selfish of that. But, when I was introduced to, you have to love yourself first before you can love anybody else. It's the same thing, right? And you think that's egotistical. It's like, no. You better love yourself, because if you don't love yourself, the one that you have the most intimate relationship with, how in the world could you possibly love somebody else?
How are you going to show up for other people?
Right.
Yeah.
How do you find that though? Because I think people are searching so hard for that, and there's so many questions about, who am I? Who should I be? And all that other stuff. And I'll go back to like Simon Sinek's why, right?
Yeah.
So Sinek talks about his why, and I think that's brilliant, right? Understanding your why. But I also think it's a little bit of it's a selective thing for people, because I don't think you really can understand your why until you have some experience behind you to understand what drives you. So I think why I park for maybe a little bit later in your career, right? Not in your 20s and stuff like that. I mean, you could try it, but I don't think it's as relevant. Values, though, I've gone through the value. Like when my dad passed away back in 2021, it really threw me for I was in a weird spot for about a year. I was stuck in neutral. And I remember going to Sedona, Arizona, and doing a soul event, like basically taking 3 to 4 days to myself, without my wife, without my daughter, and going on this soul adventure where, I talked to shamans, and I talked, and I did palm readings and all this stuff. And some was better than others, but really it came down to like recentering on my values, right? And saying, okay, because I always thought I had good values, but I never really put them pen to paper and thought about every single one of them and force ranked what's most important, what's least important. So, but I've always been a rather self-aware person. I absolutely know my strengths. I absolutely know my weaknesses. What about people who aren't as self-aware? Like, how do they find that authentic self? How do they find, with all the noise that is of what you should be and what people look like and all these Instagram and that shit, like how do you really center on that for, I think, a lot of kids who are struggling right now?
Yeah, it does start for me, and the work I do with my clients and with teams and the organizations I've worked in, it always starts with values. And it's about really understanding where those come from. And I do a series of exercises with clients around, envisioning people that you admire, looking at people who are out there either in history or celebrity or in your intimate knowledge of people that are in your life. And it's about looking for the things that you admire in others, and also looking at the end of your life, doing some visualization about the things that bring you abundance, or at least what you believe will have brought you abundance, and doing some work in that space to uncover those core values. And then, when we start to identify the small short list of what those might be, I often, say, all right, to my clients, now I want you to go out and experience those. Because if generosity is your core value, then the next time you're standing in the grocery line and the person who is short $2, or their credit card isn't working, you might be that person that then just automatically says, here, you just tap my card and you move along, because generosity shows up that way for you, right? But if efficiency is more of your core value, and you start to experience the same grocery store line and the cashier is yiking and yakking and having a chit chat with the person in front of you, and you're like, come on, chop, chop, chop. You're like, I gotta go use the self-checkout. Well, that's a realization of how your value shows up, and it's about going out and then experiencing yourself with your values. I see you light up there, John. Does that make sense?
Well, So yes, because it's very relevant to me. But so here's my question on that one. Like, let's dive into that. I'm both, right? I feel like I'm super generous, but I'm also efficient. I guess you could say that as a word. But impatient is another one. I don't know if impatience is a value.
It's a shadow, right? Yeah, sure.
So, like that exact scenario, I'll be sitting there and I'll be, behind somebody who's trying to pay, and if I can tell they're like struggling, you know what I mean? If I can tell they're all like they're counting their change and those type of things, and then I'm gonna be short, I will literally be the first one to say, hey, you know what? Here's $5, I'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. But there's other times where I'm sitting behind somebody who's fumbling around and everything like that. And I'm like, just get the fuck out of my way. Like, please, I need to get somewhere. So how do you, let's use that as a good example, because I could experience both of those very genuinely in my life, that I want to help somebody who I can see is in need, but I also am very impatient when I want to just get somebody the hell out of my way. So how would you unpack that for somebody like me? If I'm sitting in front of you as one of your clients and I'm like, yeah, okay, that's a great example. I want to be generous, and I'll do that, but I'm also wicked impatient. And so I get people out of the way. Is it situational? Because values shouldn't be situational, right? They should be core.
Generally are not situational. But what I shift to next for the conversation is, okay, so John, what do you believe your core strengths are? Because if your strength is, patience, or in your case, you said your shadow strength is maybe impatience. It's then how do you hijack that moment for yourself to get into a place of patience, right? If you know that about yourself. And then the second and maybe the last part of that is really about purpose. What are you living your life to do? What is your mission, your North Star? If your North Star says to you, get out of my way because I'm here to make money and I'm just only going to do that, then you can pay the guys fair, or pay money at the register and say, all right, we're out of here, dude, let's keep moving. But, these three buckets go together to really form authenticity. And that's really what we mean by that first part of being authentic, is understanding how you show up with those core values, how you use your strength, and then you align those to making impact through the purpose that you want to, have on this life, on this planet. The other part of the definition really is about resilience.
I was gonna dive into that next, because you break down a bunch of different types of resilience, right? Or adversity, if you will.
Yeah, adversity. Listen, I couldn't write a book about resilience and not talk about adversity, because guess what? It's here to stay.
Yeah, exactly.
But, resilience, I think, is an equally interesting definition. And I'll tell you, I kind of got pissed off during the pandemic because everybody was talking about resilience. Oh, we're so resilient. We're learning resilience. And we just have to keep going, and we have to just do these things. And, there's a big difference between what I define as resilience and other words like endurance or perseverance or even hardiness. And when you look into the scientific literature, also, these are very distinctive things that researchers and psychologists look at differently. But resilience, in my definition, is really about taking control back from an adversity. That's part one. Shit hits the fan, you take control back of that. Right? You can allow that fan to blow the shit all over you if you want.
Yeah.
And that's great. Or you can figure out how you're going to take the control back. That's step one. The second part of the definition of resilience is really then how you use the learning of turning that fan off or cleaning up after the mess or whatever, that you learn something and you use it so that the next time that you step in shit or shit hits the fan or whatever that analogy is, you're more prepared to do that. And when you put authenticity together with that, which is your unique imprint of how you show up, all of the life experiences that you have, the learnings that you've had, the troubles, the other resilience moments, the learning that sits in your brain, in combination with then moving through that adversity, that's the power pack of authentic resilience. That's the supercharger. Because when you use your purpose, your core strengths and values to get through the hard crap, you're unstoppable. And I would guess, John, this is my question back to you, is what has made you unstoppable for 28 years in sales? Is it a combination of some of those things? What is it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think the values piece for me, I fundamentally believe this profession, when done right, is the greatest profession in the world. When done wrong, it's one of the worst. And because when I say done great, I have a true passion for allowing myself, I look at my core values, right? Authenticity, make it happen, give a shit, family first, and give 1%. And it's one of those things where it's hard to explain, right? Because I think freedom also is, I took freedom off a little while ago, but freedom is one of my values too, to be able to do what I want to do, right? And you've heard the same thing. It's like money doesn't buy happiness, it buys freedom. And that for me, I've always wanted to do my own thing. And I've always wanted to empower others to do their own thing. And so sales to me is an avenue for that, because instead of going, for instance, to college, which I think is a bit of a joke these days, especially, the 4-year college when you don't know what you want to be when you grow up, and spending, $300,000 in debt to get a $40,000 a year job. I think that's just ridiculous. And I'd rather have a kid come out of high school and be introduced to maybe sales first and say, hey, before you go what everybody's telling you have to do and you don't know what you want to do, why don't you maybe try this profession out, make a few bucks, and then come back and then decide what you want to do. Right? Like I wrote a book with my daughter of I want to be in sales when I grow up. And the goal there is to get kids into sales and understand that it's a profession. So there's been a drive for me to realize what sales has done for me and the flexibility and freedom that it's given to me, and the desire to see other people who are stuck in positions and who don't, who want to see the fruits of their labor be rewarded. Right? Because I've always been the type of like, hey, if I work harder than you, I should get paid more than you. You know what I mean? I'm not the merit guy, the 2.5% merit raise because you lived here for 3 years, or, let's talk to universities. Like, I think tenure is bullshit. I honestly think tenure is absolute bullshit, because it just breeds laziness. I don't understand. Okay, good for you. You worked your ass off for 10 years and now you get to coast for the rest of your life? Like, that doesn't make any sense for me. So I think that's what's driven me to stay in this. And also, I guess it's probably a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, in the sense that I've never taken money from anybody else. I've never taken VC funding. I've always said, I'm going to figure this out on my own, and I'm going to chart my own path. And so I think that's what's driven me to stay here, is because I don't fit in a box. I've tried the corporate thing and it just didn't feel right for me. And I didn't know why back then. But now I do, right? Because my parents were entrepreneurs, even though they never said it, right? They both worked out of the house. And so I had that DNA in me. And my dad was a total fuck you. Like, my dad was a mechanical engineer, or electrical engineer, who was smarter than anybody I've ever met in my life. But his problem was he felt like the work should speak for itself, and he never self-promoted. So he was always the fuck off anti-establishment, because I'm so good at what I do, but I shouldn't have to promote it. So he fought hard, but he fought in a different way than I fought. And so I have that DNA, which drives me every day to stand up and say, all right, I'm going to figure this out again. And one more piece to this, I'm not a historian. I have a terrible memory, and I hate history, and I don't read books. I just go forward.
Yeah.
So that's probably my thing. It's like, and I've made a lot of mistakes because I could have probably learned from somebody else who's been there, done that. But for some reason, I like making my own mistakes. I like fucking up myself. I like learning from that and moving forward. And I get bored with reading somebody's book who's done it and tells me how to do it, quite frankly.
Freedom is a value of yours for sure. And I think it's super clear just hearing that narrative come through. And I'm glad you touched on something that's also dear to my heart, which is rumination. We often, as humans, we're actually the only species on the planet that has this unique capability to both ruminate on past and forecast future and see these things. And actually, if you divided up, 100% of our daily thoughts, of being either in the now versus being in the past or being in the future, what you would find is in the now is about 5%, and everything else is to the sides of that. So, not thinking about history is actually a good thing in terms of being fully present with yourself. And that's a big part of understanding who you are as an authentic person, but also, as you're going through hard shit, and going through what I call the reality curve, being fully present for that is actually a massive strength. So, I think it's one of the superpower gifts of what I call in my real model, facing reality, is if you can be fully present. So I kudos to you, John, for that, because it's not easy for people to really stay fully present, because we're often thinking about the past and we're always trying to, forecast our future.
Well, that's the, one thing that I came up with my daughter. She was probably 7 or 8 at the time. And I remember getting really, really pissed off of, the election. My wife and I were kind of screaming at the TV and all this other stuff. And I noticed that impact on my daughter. And she started getting angry for no reason other than mommy and daddy were angry. And I remember I looked at I was like, oh, damn it. And I shut off the TV. And I said, look, sweetheart, I'm like, we can't worry about that because we can't control that. So let's brainstorm of what we can control. And we came up with this little acronym, which is EAT, EAT. So effort, attitude, and how you treat people, right? You control your effort, whether, how hard you work. You control your attitude and whether it's positive or not. And you can control how you treat other people. You can't control how they treat you, but you can control other people. So we do this little handshake every morning where it's like, all right, what can we control today, right? And I think that's always been my thing, is like, I constantly have to remind myself of past, I can't control that. It's already happened. Future, I can't control that. That hasn't happened yet. I can control what's happening right now. I can control, and not control in that way, but this conversation, you know what I mean? Like how this experience is, but I can't control what's going to happen tomorrow. So the stress that I have, and actually with everything that's happened to me personally over the past year and a half, I've realized that strategy at this point, like looking a year out, looking 6 months out, like I have no fucking idea what's going to happen in 6 months right now based on what's going on in this world. So I wake up every day just trying to win today. I'm just like, how can I win today? Because if I can win today, then maybe I can win tomorrow. And if I can win tomorrow, maybe I can win the next day. And I'm not going to win every day, but I'm going to stack those wins up. But I'm going to control what I can control. So that's really where I've always been, because, past doesn't interest me and the future is too unpredictable in a lot of ways.
I love that. This is exactly why I wrote Your Real Life, which is the book that I'm really proud of. And Your Real Life is really about keeping real conversations, exactly what you're defining. I look at then this power pack of authentic resilience, and I was trying to figure out what's the key ingredients, because people always ask me, they're like, Nate, how did you do fashion runway stuff and then work in Major League Baseball, and then you went to tsunami land and earthquakes and and I'm like, I don't know. There's something to it. And what it came out to be was what I talk about in the book, which is the real model. And, resilient people, which is kind of what you're echoing here, is, they do 4 key things really, really well. Resilient people understand reality. That's that first anchor. They know how to move through the reality curve, as I call it. And a lot of times people just get stuck from the acknowledgement to the acceptance, and they just slide down that slope of suffering, and they can't ever break out of that. They often can't see what I call opportunity. When adversity and opportunity collide, if you see that, and if you see that as a salesperson or as a business person or as a strategic thinker, you see the dark part of the shit that's happening. But you also can look inside of that and say, hey, actually, there's something else here. What is that? I'm going to breathe life into that and then build my action plan. And in order to build the action plan, you have to move to the second part of the model, which is all about energy. Time is finite. And I learned this the hard way through some of my experiences, was you just run out of time. You can't do anything about it. But what you can do is put your energy in the right places. We have 4 well-being batteries. And I constantly tell teams of people and people who work for me and around the world in global well-being, is if you're conscious and aware of your 4 well-being batteries, you can supercharge them. And if you know what your purpose is, particularly as you move to the A, which is all about, authenticity, and you know what your purpose is, that can be a supercharger that helps you stay focused. It's also, the last part of this model that is probably the most important one, and you talked about it, which is community. And that comes with leading your life with love. Love, we all talk about it. And I think we should be talking about love in business a lot more, because the love of money, and we love top line growth, and we love bonus payouts, and we love sales commissions. There's a lot of love that we're talking about in business, but what we're not talking about in business is the love that I define as how you forgive yourself in those moments that are really hard, how you forgive other team members, how you forgive and look at forgiveness generally so that you can continue to move on to the next business deal. But it's also about community and building the collective. It is about the words that we use, and it's also about having a sense of humor. We love laughing at work, and sometimes we're laughing about the crap outside of work. But if we're really trying to build a resilient team and a group of folks, and sometimes we've got to laugh at ourselves that, we cannot take ourselves too seriously. And so, those are the ingredients, and that spells out real. It's a real model. You can kind of go backwards, forwards. You can start anywhere in that thing. But the idea is when you get real, you're going to be able to get through anything. And if you power pack that with a loaded purpose and authentic self, look out. You'll be able to do anything in your life. And then you unlock things like you're talking about, John, which is freedom and, making it happen, get shit done. That's absolutely, comes together when you take a real approach.
I love it. So let's talk about energy a little bit on the real factor, right? Because I think there's so much time and energy people put into things that our energy sucks, right? People, right? Processes, things you do. And I have this little kind of grid that I help people go through. I don't help people go through. I posted about this, and this is kind of how I think about it, which is I did this kind of XY axis of stuff that helps me achieve my goals is on the higher end of the x-axis, and does not help me achieve my goals is on the lower end. And then on the y-axis to the right is gives me energy, and to the left is takes energy away from me. And what I do is I go through a process of putting everything that I'm doing into one of those buckets, right? So for instance, if it gives me energy and helps me achieve my goals, I go all in. If it doesn't give me energy, but helps me achieve my goals, that's where I eat the frog, or I outsource it, or whatever it is, right? I compartmentalize that. If it gives me energy but doesn't help me achieve my goals, those are like hobbies and things that I think are important. But if it doesn't give me energy and doesn't help me achieve my goals, I cut out as much of that as I possibly can. So how do you, because there's so many different energy sucks with social media, email, clients, prospects, employees. How do you help somebody center on and manage their energy? Because over the years, I've gotten better at not reacting when I get hyper pissed off about somebody who's coming at me. But that took a while for me to develop that skill to not react, because I'm a very high D on the DISC scale. So when you hit me, I'm going to hit you back hard. And that's my gut reaction, right? I don't lose, right? So if you hit me, I'm coming after you, and we're going to escalate this through the roof. So I've learned to calm down a little bit through various mechanisms of asking questions, taking a breath, counting to 10, those type of things. But how do you help people identify what their energy sucks are and where they should be focusing their energy?
I love this model. I'm totally taking it, John.
Please do. Yeah.
It works. Yeah. This is a lot of what I talk about in my book as well is when you're looking at energy, it's about recognizing energy positive activity and energy negative activity. These kind of two are the fundamental buckets. I love the way you've even subdivided it and connected that to goal achievement. When I look at it from a general point of view of well-being, the energy piece is what also drives our overall well-being and helps us perform in life. I like what you've done here. The way I do it with my clients is really we systematically look at all of the things that are happening in someone's day. We do what I call an energy audit, and we systematically categorize, similar to what you're talking about on your X and Y. And we look at, does this thing that you're doing in your daytime, whether we're talking, and sometimes this is business clients, sometimes these are life coaching clients. It just depends, but the activity is the same. If your day, and I think it was Dale Carnegie that said this a long time ago with that matrix, is like, you control your day doesn't control you. And I think so many people, when we're talking about time management, they allow that kind of thought to be there. It's like, I'm in control of my time. But in reality, they're not. They're just mismanaging energy. So if by looking at the list of activities and then identifying, if that activity is energy positive or energy negative, it brings awareness to people so they can understand, why their time gets sucked away and why their batteries, their physical batteries being drained, or why their mental battery. A lot of people at work, particularly sales folks, they're constantly spinning. Like, how do I look for that opportunity? How do I look for the next deal? How do I make sure we move on? And, rejection is redirection. Like, I got to keep thinking. Well, that's a mental exhaustion at the end of the day. If you don't recognize that some of, the activity that you're doing is actually not charging you up, as you said, giving you energy, then calling attention to that enables you to kind of reshuffle that portfolio of energy spend. And that's what it really comes down to.
Yeah, it's almost labeling it and recognizing, because I thought a lot of this stuff that I've realized over the years is until I might have done some of it here or there, or kind of, but without recognizing it and labeling it and being like, look, this is what that is. Like, until you go through that process, I think it's like there's some understanding of it, but there's not like a concrete, oh, okay, right? Because when I started doing this energy audit to a certain degree, I started realizing like these people that are in my life there are people who every time I talk to them, I light up and I feel like, conquering the world after I have that conversation with them regardless. And there are other people where I just walk away from those conversations just feeling exhausted because they're always negative. They're always, whatever. And I just dealt with it because they were friends. But when I really sat down and said, like, this is impacting me, going back to actually where we were talking before this, like the decision fatigue of wearing the same shirt every single time. I thought it was a joke when Steve Jobs and, oh yeah, decision fatigue. But then when I started wearing the Make It Happen shirt every single day, I was like, oh my God, that matters, right? Like that does help. And then when I started labeling energy suckers, if you will, and recognizing who they were in my life, and slowly, not immediately, people say, oh, cut off. No, not immediately. I mean, these are friends. These are people that I've had from, high school and stuff like that. So I started slowly limiting them and almost bucketing them in an area. It's like, okay, I know what to expect from this person, so I need to be mentally prepared to have this conversation, but I'm only going to have it in these scenarios. I'm not going to let them intrude on my day anytime they want. Do you think there comes a certain level of maturity of experience with a lot of this stuff where you've had to have experienced some of the adversity that, like, for instance, that you've been through, and some of the energy sucks that have wasted your time? Or is this something you can nip in the bud early in your career or in your life?
I think a little bit of both. Yeah. I think I wish that I would have entertained some of these tools early in my life. So I always advocate kind of getting started, with building a portfolio of investments for your well-being. No different than the portfolio for your finances, but do those investments in coaches and therapists and counselors early on, because when you do that, you're actually investing in yourself and getting to use these tools so that you benefit from that and get to a life of well-being and joy faster, sooner, and you experience those moments of well-being and joy earlier in your life. That said, I think to your point, there's a story in the book about a lady I used to work with, and she did this energy audit, and she did a very similar tactical approach. We kind of drew some columns and said, here's the things that are draining my energy at the moment. And then we did an associated list of, those people who were kind of associated with that. And what she found was that in her youth, when she was younger, she loved going out drinking and, carousing with the girls and doing all the things that they would do. And over time, she reevaluated, looked at the only thing that they really had in common was getting blasted, every once in a while. And that wasn't something that she wanted to do as she had moved on in her life. And so that kind of movement from toxic positivity, like, yeah, this is so great and it's all going to be fine and don't worry, let's just keep going, is a realization, that you can come to at any time in your life. But I think I'll come back to what I said first. I think if you start applying some of the tools earlier in your life, you get to a place where you're clearer and you get to well-being and joy faster. Our lives, I mean, I just turned 50 last year, and it's like, oh, wait a minute. How did we get here?
Shit, right? I'm 48. I'm coming up on 50 pretty quick. I'm like, damn.
And so, I have the benefit of the doubt of having gone through some catastrophes and some heavy shit, but like everyone does, and everyone has that story. So it's about how do you move from the hard stuff to enjoy the good stuff. And I think it's about investing in some of these tools earlier. If we were to start to think about our well-being that way, in a different way, like we would our financial portfolios, I think there'd be a lot more happiness out in the world.
I totally agree with that. Last question. I don't know if there's a great answer for this one, but I'm curious from your perspective. You mentioned toxic positivity, right? Oh, no, it's great. It's great. It's great. You're like, oh, no, everything's fantastic when it's not, right?
Everything happens for a reason. That's my favorite.
Yeah. Actually, I've come around on that one, quite frankly. I think that I used to say that, unfortunately. And I think now I realize how insensitive that is to say. Because you tell me my dad died for a reason, I'm going to punch you right in the fucking eye.
Yep.
Right. But have you ever read Matthew McConaughey's Green Lights?
No, it's on my list. It is on the list.
Oh, Nate, please don't read it, by the way. Don't read it. Listen to it.
Okay.
It is.
All right.
It is unbelievable. And the whole concept of green lights is no matter what, things happen in people's lives, and a lot of people look at them as red lights. Oh, woe is me. But his perspective is, yeah, that was shitty, but green lights, I wouldn't be here if that didn't happen, right? So not necessarily everything happens for a reason. So I've shifted and everything happens for a reason too. There's always a silver lining if you look hard enough.
Mm-hmm.
That I can buy into, right? Because I get to look at my dad. There are a couple of silver linings. It got me to wake up as much as horrible as that was, it got me to realize some things about myself and change some things about myself type of thing. So my question more is, with somebody who's maybe experienced, has kind of gone through the values and is self-aware, when you have friends who are those toxic positivity ones where their life isn't in great shape, but yet they're constantly, oh, no, things are great. Yep, things are good, and they're never really allowing that real deep, and they might do it through therapy and have other conversations with other people, but as a friend, have you ever had to approach somebody who is toxic positivity or practices that to hide a lot of the things that they are going through? Have you ever had to do that, and how would you?
Yeah, that's a big question too, John.
I know.
You should change the name of your show to Make It Happen with Big Questions. Holy smokes. I fundamentally think as an executive, as a manager, as a human, that one of the greatest gifts that we can give to another person in any of the contexts is listening. And we've gotten really bad at that. We're terrible at really listening to understand and being curious about what's really going on with the other people that we're sharing life with, or that we're talking to, or that we're leading, or our clients. And so I think if we took a little bit more time to listen, and I love this quote by Mark Twain. He said, if we were supposed to talk more than we were listening, we'd have two mouths and one ear. If we really spend the time and invest in that and developing our sense of empathy, because it's been interesting to come back to America after 15 years and watch the crazy show that is America Inc. happen from abroad, and come back and be right in the middle of it. And it's like people are horrible at listening to each other. They're horrible at really giving gratitude for their fellow humans down the street next door. And that, I think, to answer the question, you look at toxic positivity, you got to break through that. And I think that the tool is really empathy and empathetic listening. And if we did more of that, then I think there would be less toxic positivity. And we have to get away from all the catchphrases in English. that just, we greet each other on the street like, hi, how are you? I'm fine, thanks. How are you? Yeah. How's it going? Everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to work out for a reason. All be okay. That is a throwaway, thing. And I think if we really took stock and stopped, it was the old stop, drop, and roll. I think we stop, drop, and listen, and really kind of take time with each other again. We get back to a place where community and love could really be a thing that does make the world go round. And I think that's part of where we need to be.
Yeah, I think we need to get back to that quite a bit because, to your point, I think we've gotten away from it. We're more divided now than we ever have been, and I feel it. And I think there's got to be a way to get us back to center here. And actually, let's circle all the way back. I think this does come into the form of values, right? Because I always say, like, if you and I have the similar values, we can argue, but we'll come to an agreement at the end of the day, and it'll be a respectful agreement. But if you and I have different values, we're just going to tear each other apart. And I think that's what's going on right now. It's like, and we can go macro on this, but I think if 10 years ago you would ask, 20 years ago you would ask, what are American values? You'd get pretty similar answers from both sides. Now you ask both sides, completely different answers. And I think that's what the problem is. We've gotten away from the core values of what made this country great in the first place. Despite all our warts and everything else that we have and how we got here. I don't want to talk about the horrible history of this country and how we got here. But some of the core values definitely kind of got us in a positive spot. Now I think we're losing that. And I'm trying to figure out a way to get us back there because we need to, as just humans in general. So
I think your work in doing this with entrepreneurs and other people who listen to your broadcast and to your podcast is a fantastic way to do that by bringing not just business people and business leaders, but also psychologists and other people who are in this work. Because in the end, we are in it together.
We're all in it together. So appreciate that, Nate. Well, look, this is a fascinating conversation. I think we could keep going here, but let's tie a knot on this. Where can people find out more information about you, the book, and everything else that you're working on right now?
Yeah, so Your Real Life is the title of the book. It is available on Amazon in Kindle format. I'm working on audiobook at the moment, but it's hardback and softback. You can also find me at nathanandres.com and check out my blog and other work that I do. I'm very active on LinkedIn talking about well-being and human resource management. I also am on Instagram. Speaking of distractions that are positively interesting, you can find me at NathanAndres_coach, where I do put some content over there too, and sometimes some videos and connect with people. I just love people. I love that people keep it real. Which is why I wrote Your Real Life, and I'm hoping that it's helpful for people to get to a life of well-being and joy. And that's what I want for people. So thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, Nate. I appreciate you coming on, and I think I'm going to highly recommend everybody take a look. Grab this book and try to digest this a little bit and see if you can. If you're one of those toxically positive people out there, maybe stop saying everything's great every once in a while and take a step back and have a real conversation, because it's not great out there, and it's okay. It's okay that things aren't great. So, Nate, again, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it, man.
Amazing. Thanks, John.
All right, everybody. Like I always say, hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. And like I always say at the end of all these podcasts here, go out there and make somebody smile today. Because no matter how bad your day's going or you think it went, you make somebody smile today and you know you had a good day, and the world needs a lot more of that right now. So thank you all very much, and I will see you on the other side. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. With your support and our incredible guests, we're one of the top sales podcasts out there right now, and I can't thank you enough. Now, to keep the momentum going, it would mean the world to me if you could go and leave a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform and share some of your favorite episodes with your network. Also, I am super excited to be launching my new newsletter, where I'll be sharing everything I know and everything I'm learning along the way while I'm out there selling every day just like you. Go to jbarrows.com/newsletter to sign up today. Let's all level up and make this happen together.